Patrick Mahomes just became the first NFL player to sign a contract worth more than $500 million. But it wasn't the money that got everyone talking. It was one comment he made moments later, a comment nobody expected to hear from the face of the Chiefs franchise. Let me catch you up. The ink was barely dry. On June 10, 2026, the Kansas City Chiefs announced they had restructured Patrick Mahomes' contract, adding 2 years to his deal and pushing the total value to $504.75 million, the first contract in NFL history worth more than $500 million. The sports world went absolutely nuclear. Social media lit up. Sports anchors were breathless. Clark Hunt was beaming. Mahomes' agency, Equity Sports, went on social media and posted, "The magic continues." Everyone assumed this was the cleanest, most uncomplicated story in football. A franchise locking in the game's best player for life. End of discussion. But then Mahomes talked, and what he said didn't match the fairy tale energy. Everyone else was selling. He stepped in front of the media, and when a reporter asked about his long-term future, about whether this was it, whether Kansas City was his forever home, Mahomes didn't give the scripted answer. He didn't say, "I'm a Chief for life." He didn't recite the loyalty speech. Instead, he said something raw and honest that cut through all of it. "As a competitor and as a football player, I want to be there. I can't predict the future." A quiet pause. Then he moved on. Just like that. That sentence, "I can't predict the future," is not what you say when you're certain. That's not the language of a man who sees his whole life playing out in the same stadium. And people heard it. NFL insiders, fans, analysts, they all stopped and rewound. Because coming from Patrick Mahomes, at the moment of the biggest contract signing in the sport's history, those words hit completely differently. This wasn't the press conference anyone expected. This was something else entirely. Let's zoom out and take in just how massive this deal actually is, because the size of it makes what Mahomes said even more striking. The new money on the restructured deal came in at $239.05 million, with the total value sitting at $504.75 million. Running from 2026 through 2033. Every single dollar of it is guaranteed through contract mechanisms. And if Mahomes hits his performance incentives, Super Bowl appearances, MVP awards, he can make up to $522.25 million. That's north of $500 million. From one player, from one team, in one sport. Starting in 2027, when the new money kicks in, Mahomes will average $64 million per year, a new NFL record for average annual value. To put that in context, Dak Prescott had been the previous high-water mark, at $60 million a year. Mahomes didn't just surpass that, he demolished it. And the deal runs through his age, 38 season, tying him to Kansas City, through the 2033 season on paper. This is the most ironclad quarterback commitment in league history. So then why, with all of that on the table, did Mahomes hedge? Why didn't he just play the part? That's the question that's been bouncing around every NFL newsroom, podcast, and comment section since the signing dropped. And to understand the answer, you need to understand everything that surrounded this deal. The injury, the collapse, the roster tension, and the very real questions about whether the Chiefs' dynasty still has legs, because this contract didn't happen in a vacuum. It happened in the middle of one of the most turbulent chapters this organization has ever seen. The Chiefs went 6-11 last season. Read that again, 6-11. This was a team that had been to 3 straight Super Bowls, a team that had won back-to-back championships, a team that many people were seriously calling the greatest NFL dynasty since the Patriots, and they went 6-11, missing the playoffs for the first time since 2014. That ending, a 6-game losing streak to close out the year, wasn't just a stumble, it was a crash landing. And in the middle of that crash, Mahomes went down. He tore his ACL and LCL in a loss to the Los Angeles Chargers late in Week 15. Season over. Off-season surgery. A months-long rehabilitation that nobody could fully predict the outcome of. And then while the football world was still processing what this all meant, while the question of whether Mahomes would even be ready for Week 1 of 2026 was still genuinely open, the Chiefs went ahead and gave him $500 million. So yes, the deal is massive, but it dropped in an environment full of uncertainty, not clarity. And Mahomes' own words reflected that. The internet did not miss it. Clips of Mahomes' "I can't predict the future" line circulated within hours. Former players weighed in. Skip Bayless had already written 3 sentences in his head. Before the clip finished playing, Colin Cowherd spent part of a segment on it. The consensus among analysts was split between those who saw it as honest self-awareness and those who read it as a quiet flag, a flicker of doubt from a man who had just staked his entire future on one organization. What nobody could argue was that it was unexpected. Because Mahomes doesn't do unexpected. He's the most media-trained, emotionally composed quarterback of his generation. So when he drops something like that at a contract signing, you pay attention. And the timing made it even louder. This is the third time in 6 years that Mahomes and the Chiefs have restructured his deal. Each time, the machinery has worked smoothly. Each time, there's been the same celebration, the same mutual admiration, the same air of permanence. But this time felt different, because this time, the backdrop was a franchise in a rough patch, a 6-11 season, a quarterback on a knee brace, a roster full of cap concerns and aging veterans, and Mahomes staring down the back end of his 20s and the front end of what could be a very different second chapter. Chose not to pretend that forever was a certainty, that honesty is the story, and it opens up a whole set of questions about what's really going on inside one Arrowhead Drive. Let's start from the beginning. Patrick Mahomes was selected by the Chiefs with the 10th overall pick in the 2017 NFL Draft. He came out of Texas Tech, where he'd been a dual-threat weapon, with an arm that made scouts talk like they'd seen something from another planet. But Kansas City was patient with him. They let him sit behind Alex Smith for a full season, before handing him the keys in 2018. What followed was one of the most breathtaking 8-year runs a quarterback has ever produced. He threw for nearly 36 yards, earned 6 Pro Bowl nods, and won 3 Super Bowl titles and 5 trips to the championship game. The NFL had seen franchise quarterbacks before. They'd seen generational ones, but the way Mahomes bent games to his will, the no-look passes, the improvised touchdowns, the fourth-quarter comebacks, it felt genuinely new. In 2020, Mahomes signed a 10-year, $450 million deal with the Chiefs. At the time, it set a benchmark not just for quarterbacks but for any football player who had ever suited up. It was the contract that said, this man is here for the rest of his prime and probably beyond it. It was a statement of dynasty intent, and for several years, it played out exactly as advertised. Kansas City kept winning. Mahomes kept ascending. The Chiefs kept making Super Bowls. Everything was on track, but the 2020 contract had a shelf life. The quarterback market doesn't stay still. Dak Prescott signed a deal averaging $60 million a year. Josh Allen locked in at over $55 million. Jordan Love reset the market for his tier. Joe Burrow and others followed. And with each new deal signed by a peer, Mahomes' original terms fell further behind market rate. The Chiefs had been smart about it, restructuring his deal multiple times to maintain cap flexibility. But the underlying reality was that his pay needed a significant correction. This latest extension was that correction. The new money begins in 2027, where he'll average $64 million per year. That's a $19 million per year raise from what he was previously set to earn in that window, a number that reflects not just his value to the franchise, but his value to the NFL as a product. Mahomes is appointment television. He's merchandise. He's the engine behind one of the most commercially successful sports franchises on the planet. The Chiefs didn't sign this deal because they had to. They signed it because they wanted to, loudly and on record, tell the world exactly where they stand. But here's what that statement from the Chiefs doesn't answer. What does Mahomes himself think about the next 8 years? Not publicly, not the Instagram post with the family photo in red. What does he think privately in the moments when the media training fades and the competitor in him surfaces? Because that competitor, the one who said, "I can't predict the future," is the one who told us something real. And if you listen to the full context of what Mahomes said around that line, the picture gets even more interesting. He wasn't just hedging about his career location. He was talking about his physical future. He was talking about getting back on the field. The goal at the very far end, he said, was to be ready for week 1. That's not the language of a man thinking about 2033. That's the language of a man who has been grinding through rehab every single day and whose primary focus is the next snap, not the next decade. The $500 million contract is almost a background detail to him right now. The foreground is the left knee. The foreground is proving he's still himself. And that's the thread we need to pull on. Because underneath the contract celebration, underneath all the record-breaking numbers and the family photos at the signing table, there is a very real physical question mark sitting over the entire project. Mahomes tore his ACL and his LCL in the same knee. Late in a December game, with his team already sinking, he was on injured reserve for the final 3 games of the season, all losses. Surgery followed immediately, and now he's in the middle of one of the most watched recoveries in professional sports. The reports coming out of Kansas City have been mostly positive. General manager Brett Veach said Mahomes was way ahead of schedule. Mahomes himself told reporters his rehab was hitting every checkpoint the doctors set. He was back on the field during OTAs, though he was wearing a knee brace, which he insisted was not an issue. But the league's analysts aren't entirely convinced. NFL Network and ESPN both ran pieces questioning whether, even if he returns week 1, his durability across an entire 2026 season is anything close to guaranteed. Dan Graciano raised the concern specifically on ESPN. The narrative was shifting from whether Mahomes would be ready to start the season to whether he could last the whole thing. That's a brutal framing for a guy who just signed the biggest contract in football history. Because if Mahomes goes down again, even partially, even for a few weeks, the ripple effects through this organization are enormous. Not just competitively, but contractually, emotionally, structurally. The whole thing is built around one knee. And this is where Mahomes' comment starts to echo in ways that go beyond a single press conference answer. When he says, "I can't predict the future," is he talking about whether he'll spend his whole career in Kansas City? Or is he talking about whether his body will let him do what he's been doing, or both? Because those two questions are deeply connected. The contract that runs through 2033 assumes a Mahomes who plays like himself, a diminished Mahomes, a post-injury Mahomes who never quite gets his explosiveness back, is a completely different conversation. And Mahomes, perhaps more than anyone in that room, understands that. Tim Hasselbeck appeared on ESPN right after the extension was announced and tried to give it the most optimistic read possible. He called it a long-term investment and said Mahomes was the most valuable piece of their franchise. Hard to argue with any of that. Clark Hunt came out with a statement, calling Mahomes a generational talent and an elite human being. Brett Veach called the deal a landmark deal for a once-in-a-lifetime player. Everyone in the building was performing pure confidence, but the people who know Mahomes best, the ones who've watched him play through pain, watched him process a 6-11 season, watched him rehabilitate a devastating injury. While his team brought in Justin Fields as a backup, they weren't quite as unbothered, because they know what it means when Mahomes doesn't give the clean answer. He almost always gives the clean answer. He's been doing it since he was 23 years old, and suddenly the most famous athlete in the state of Missouri. So when he skips it, that's a signal. It's a quiet one, but it's real. Here's what the press conference told us, stripped of all the noise. Patrick Mahomes is locked in financially, but he's not locked in emotionally in the way that everyone assumed. He wants to be here. He said that clearly. But he's also a competitor first, and competitors don't make promises about destinations. They make commitments to performance. His commitment right now is to getting healthy, getting back on that field, and proving that the ACL didn't take anything from him. The rest, the 2033 stuff, the career capping stuff, that's a question he's not in a position to answer yet. And he knows it, which is why he told us that. What makes this so compelling is that for the entire Mahomes era, we've never really had to ask the question. The loyalty was automatic. The future was assumed. Nobody doubted that he was a Chief until they put him in the ground. The contract in 2020 felt permanent. The back-to-back Super Bowls felt permanent. The dynasty felt permanent. But permanence is a story you tell before things go wrong. And things have gone wrong. Not catastrophically, not irreversibly, but enough to create doubt where there was none before. Let's talk about money. Not in the abstract pop the champagne sense that most sports coverage does when a massive deal drops, but in the real ground level sense that determines what actually happens on a football field. Because the way the Chiefs structured this contract is not just about paying Mahomes. It's about managing a team, and the way they've chosen to do it tells you a lot about where they think this whole thing is going. The Chiefs and Mahomes have now restructured his deal 3 times since that original 2020 contract. Each restructure serves the same basic purpose. It lets Kansas City convert big base salary numbers into signing bonus money, which gets spread across multiple years for cap purposes. The Chiefs get immediate cap relief. Mahomes still gets paid. The roster gets the breathing room to bring in enough talent to stay competitive. It's been working for years. It's been working beautifully. The dynasty run that produced 3 championships in 5 Super Bowl trips was funded, in significant part, by the creative accounting of a quarterback who was willing to play ball with the front office on contract structure. But the latest deal is different in a key way. The new money, $239.05 million, doesn't kick in until 2027. None of it affects the 2026 cap. So the Chiefs get to sign the biggest deal in football history without adding a single dollar to their salary cap this year. That's an enormously clever piece of construction. They get the public relations win, the headlines, the $500 million celebration, the loyalty narrative, while deferring the financial consequences to a future they'll deal with later. Smart, very smart, but also telling. Sports Illustrated obtained a full breakdown of the contract structure, and the numbers reveal exactly how the Chiefs are managing the cap across the life of the deal. Mahomes gets $56.76 million this year alone. Over the next 2 years combined, $114.75 million. Over 3, $174.75 million. And on it goes, building to a record-setting $237.25 million over the first 4 years, all guaranteed against injury. There are also 2 void years tacked onto the end, which are a classic cap management tool. Cap charges across the 8 years will range from $34.65 million in year 1 to $90.35 million in year 2, before gradually adjusting through the final year. The structure is designed to give Kansas City flexibility to restructure again as circumstances demand. And that flexibility matters enormously because this contract is going to squeeze people out. The Chiefs' historic extension will force tough decisions on several veterans this offseason. 4 players in particular face uncertain futures as the new cap structure prioritizes long-term stability. The next 12 months will test Kansas City's ability to balance veteran leadership with cost-effective roster building. That's the deal on the other side of the celebration. Some people are going to get pushed out so this contract can exist. And when you start moving pieces around on a championship roster, the chemistry shifts. The continuity breaks. The thing that made the dynasty possible starts to erode. Take linebacker Drew Tranquill. He's been in Kansas City for 3 seasons, the last 2 as a full-time starter, and he's currently on a 1-year deal. He'll be 32 in 2027. He wants a multi-year contract, and this next offseason is probably his last realistic shot at getting one. The question is whether the Chiefs have the cap space and the will to give it to him. The answer is probably no, not because they don't value him, but because when Mahomes takes up $64 million a year, every other dollar becomes more precious. Tranquill may well be a casualty of this extension, without the numbers ever saying his name. Then there's Justin Fields. The Chiefs signed him on a 1-year deal as insurance, while Mahomes recovered from the knee injury. He's a placeholder. Everyone knows it. And the extension essentially confirms that this is Mahomes' team until at least the mid-2030s. Once 2026 ends, there's almost no scenario where Fields comes back. The Chiefs will find a cheaper developmental option or draft someone to sit behind Mahomes at rookie minimum. Every dollar counts now. Every roster decision runs through the Mahomes question first. Does this make him better? If not, it's probably not worth the money. And here's where things get genuinely uncomfortable. The Chiefs just signed their quarterback to $504 million, but the Broncos and Chargers both finished ahead of them last season, with each team sweeping Kansas City. The AFC West isn't what it used to be. Denver has Sean Payton, who just signed a new deal, building something real. Los Angeles has Justin Herbert operating in a system that looked dominant against this version of Kansas City. Buffalo has Josh Allen, who is still in his prime, and who has the second largest guaranteed contract in the NFL at $330 million. The conference isn't clearing a path for Kansas City just because they signed a big number. And the financial reality of this contract means the Chiefs have to be surgical. They can't throw money at problems anymore. In 2025, they signed offensive lineman Jalen Moore to a 2-year, $30 million deal, and he ended up playing just 42% of their offensive snaps. That's the kind of mistake a team with cap space can absorb. A team building around the biggest contract in history cannot. Every free agent signing, every extension, every draft pick, it all has to count. Because the machine that produces championships is expensive to run, and it just got a lot more expensive. Brett Veach, the general manager who put this deal together, has been one of the best contract architects in the NFL for years. He's the guy who figured out how to keep Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce, Chris Jones, and a competitive supporting cast on the field at the same time, year after year. He's won that game more often than he's lost it. But even Veach has limits. The Chiefs have his deal built with void years and escalators and performance incentives, all the tools of a front office that knows it needs to stay nimble. But nimble only gets you so far when the anchor item on your salary sheet is 9 figures. The performance incentives embedded in this deal are worth examining closely. From 2027 onward, Mahomes can earn an additional $1.25 million for each year he wins the Super Bowl and plays in at least 50% of snaps. He can make another $1.25 million each year he wins MVP and advances to the AFC title game. Those are meaningful incentives, not massive relative to the base, but they're symbolic. They say, we're not just paying you to show up, we're paying you to perform. And that's actually a slight shift in tone from how the Chiefs have historically spoken about their quarterback, who has always been presented as so far above incentive structures that they almost feel beside the point. The market context for this deal is important too. Adam Schefter noted this is the third time in 6 years that Mahomes and the Chiefs have reset the quarterback market. Every time, the number is bigger than anything that came before. Every time, the rest of the league scrambles to adjust. But there's a ceiling somewhere. There always is. And as the numbers climb toward levels that start to strain even the NFL's ballooning salary cap, questions about sustainability start to get louder. Not just for Kansas City, but for the whole quarterback economy that Mahomes has been driving upward for nearly a decade. For Mahomes personally, the money is almost beside the point at this stage. He's already accumulated generational wealth. He co-owns Kansas City's NWSL team, the KC Current, and holds a minority stake in MLB's Kansas City Royals. His identity in that city goes far beyond the football field. He's part of the civic fabric in a way that most athletes in most cities never achieve. So when he says the money isn't his whole motivation, when his Instagram post says, "We ain't done yet though," rather than "thanks for the bag," you believe it, because he doesn't need the bag. He signed it because he's Patrick Mahomes, and this is what he does. He doesn't lose, not contracts, not negotiations, not usually games either. But contracts don't win games. And that's where the celebratory atmosphere around this deal eventually runs into friction, because the contract is signed, the money is committed, the dynasty rhetoric is back in full swing, and the Chiefs still have to actually go play football in a division where they went 1-5 against their rivals last year, with a quarterback coming off torn ligaments against a conference that has collectively gotten better, while Kansas City stood still for a few months. NFL.com named Kansas City one of 9 teams under the microscope heading into the 2026 season. They came in at number 3 on that list, behind Buffalo and Los Angeles. The reasoning was straightforward. After finishing last with 6 consecutive losses and missing the playoffs entirely, the Chiefs have something to prove, not just to their fan base but to the league, because dynasties don't get to coast on legacy, especially not when the quarterback who built the dynasty is wearing a knee brace in June and quietly admitting he can't promise you anything about the future. There's a version of this story where the contract is the beginning of the comeback, where Mahomes gets healthy, comes out firing in week 1 against Denver, and by November, everyone has forgotten about the 6-11 season and the torn ligaments and the hedging press conference. That version is entirely possible. Mahomes has done more unlikely things than stage a comeback season. He's wired for it. The hunger is obvious even through a phone screen. When he said, "We have so much more to do. Let's go win some more." It didn't sound like a man performing motivation. It sounded like someone who genuinely feels the debt of a lost season sitting on his chest. But there's another version of this story too. One where the comeback is messier than anyone wants to admit, where the knee isn't quite the same, where the offense, which lost some key pieces and hasn't fully replaced them, doesn't operate at the level it did during the championship years, where the contract that was supposed to symbolize permanence instead becomes a monument to a dynasty that peaked and is now spending its final chapters trying to climb back. That version is also possible, and Mahomes, standing at a press conference, holding a Kansas City Chiefs contract and grinning for the cameras. Probably has both versions playing in his head simultaneously. The "I can't predict the future" line is actually the most revealing thing Mahomes has said publicly in a long time. Because for most of his career, he's operated with the absolute certainty of a man who knows he's going to win. That certainty has never been arrogance. It's always been backed by preparation, by work, by the sheer weight of his own ability. But now, there's a variable he can't control: his knee, his recovery, the way his body responds when it takes a live hit for the first time. Since the surgery, he doesn't know that yet. Nobody does. And Patrick Mahomes, who controls almost everything in a football game, is sitting with something genuinely outside his control for the first time in years. That vulnerability, that honest acknowledgement that the future isn't written, is actually more interesting than anything a clean press conference answer would have given us. Because it means the story isn't over. It means we're watching someone at a crossroads. $500 million crossroads, sure, but a crossroads nonetheless. The next chapter of this dynasty starts from exactly where Mahomes is standing right now, on a recovering knee, in a red jersey, holding a contract worth more money than most people could spend in 10 lifetimes, and refusing to promise you things he can't guarantee. To understand why Mahomes' comment lands so hard, you need to go back to the season that set the whole thing in motion. The 2025 Chiefs season was supposed to be another entry in one of the longest winning streaks the NFL had ever seen. Mahomes had made the AFC Championship game every single year since becoming the starter in 2018. 7 straight years. Every year, Kansas City was either winning the Super Bowl or losing in the conference championship. Every year, they were the last team standing in the AFC, or close enough that it didn't really matter. The dynasty had become almost boring, predictable, expected, and then it all fell apart, not gradually, not with some slow leak that the organization could spot and address. It fell apart violently, in the back half of a season that started with the Chiefs fully expecting to make it 4 Super Bowl trips in a row. The final 6 games of the 2025 season were all losses. 6 in a row to close the year. That's not a slump. That's a structural failure. A team that couldn't find answers, couldn't make halftime adjustments, couldn't manufacture wins, the way they'd been doing for years on force of will and quarterback brilliance. Mahomes' 7-season streak of playing in the AFC Championship game ended, one short of tying Tom Brady for the most in the Super Bowl era. That particular stat stings in a way that goes beyond wins and losses, because Mahomes, from the moment he took over this offense, has been chasing Brady. Not consciously, maybe, not out loud, but the comparisons have always been there, and the numerical milestones have always been a way of measuring where he stood in that conversation. 7 straight conference title game appearances would have tied Brady. He didn't get there. And the way it ended, with a torn knee in December, the team already mathematically eliminated, was the worst possible version of missing that mark. The loss that ended it came against the Chargers, a team that had become a genuine thorn in Kansas City's side. The Broncos and Chargers both finished ahead of the Chiefs in the division, and each swept Kansas City in 2025. Let that land for a second. The 2 teams that used to live in the Chiefs' shadow, that were defined for years, partly by their inability to beat Mahomes. They didn't just beat him, they swept him, both of them, in the same season. That doesn't happen by accident. It happens when a team is aging in certain places, when the scheme becomes readable, when the window that was once nailed open starts to quietly slide shut. At times during that 2025 season, Mahomes looked tired. That assessment came from NFL Network's own coverage, and it's not a small thing. Mahomes tired is still better than most quarterbacks at their best, but tired is a warning sign for a player who has never really looked tired before. The workload over 8 years, the playoff games, the Super Bowl runs, the pressure of being the face of the most scrutinized franchise in football accumulates. It compounds. Bodies and minds carry that weight differently at 30 than they did at 23. The injury itself, when it came, was the brutal, sharp end of a bad season. In the waning minutes of a loss to the Chargers, Mahomes went down with torn ligaments in his left knee. Not just the ACL, the LCL too. 2 ligaments, the kind of injury that ends seasons and in some cases changes careers. The trainers rushed out. The sideline went quiet. And in that moment, the 2025 season, and with it, the unbroken run that had defined an entire era of football, officially ended. Not with a playoff loss, not with a Super Bowl falling just short, but on a training table in December. What happened next tells you a lot about how this organization handles adversity. Mahomes underwent surgery immediately. The Chiefs went about rebuilding their roster for 2026. They brought in Kenneth Walker III, the Super Bowl MVP running back, to overhaul the backfield. They brought Eric Bieniemy back as offensive coordinator, a move that signaled a real commitment to changing the offensive identity. They also reunited with L'Jarius Sneed. On the defensive side, the offseason was active, purposeful. The message from the front office was, last year was an aberration, and we're going to fix it. But the harder truth is that some of what broke in 2025 can't be fixed by a free agent signing or a new coordinator. The Chiefs lost their identity on offense somewhere in the middle of that season. Lost the threat of Mahomes' improvisation, the mismatch of speed and space, the magic that made them impossible to defend when everything was clicking. Whether that was purely injury-related, or whether it reflects a broader aging of the core, or whether it was a coaching and scheme issue, probably some combination of all three, the team has to get those answers right heading into 2026. Because if they don't, the $504 million contract becomes a monument to the past rather than an investment in the future. The roster questions are real. There are lingering concerns about whether Mahomes has enough quality pass catchers to work with. Travis Kelce is still on the team, potentially for his final season, but at 36 or 37 by the time the playoffs arrive. He's not the same dominant force he was 3 years ago. Rashee Rice, Xavier Worthy, and Tyquan Thornton form the receiver group, and the ceiling on that trio is real. But so is the floor, particularly if any one of them misses time. The Chiefs reportedly explored bringing in Deebo Samuel to add another dimension to the passing game. That kind of search tells you the front office knows there's a gap there. The offensive line, protecting a quarterback, returning from a major knee injury, is another critical variable. The Chiefs' approach to the line heading into 2026 reflects a clear priority, protecting Mahomes above all else. That's not surprising, but it becomes a different kind of imperative when you're talking about a quarterback whose knee is still technically in recovery. One bad hit, the wrong angle, the wrong collision, the wrong sequence of events in a live game could set the whole project back again. And there's nothing in a contract, no matter how big it is, that insulates a player from that risk. Chris Jones offered one of the most honest assessments of the situation. After the final loss in 2025, every year is a journey. He said after the team's season ended, success is rented every year. Every year you get to rent success, and sometimes it doesn't go the way you plan. That's the kind of quote that gets underplayed in the immediate aftermath, but rings louder over time. Because Jones, who has been the backbone of that defense for years, who has seen every iteration of this Chiefs era, isn't sugarcoating it. He's saying we don't get to keep trophies automatically. We have to earn them every single year. And in 2025, they didn't. That framing, success is rented, is actually the most useful lens for understanding everything that's happening now. The contract, the extension, the celebration, the press conference bomb, the recovery, all of it. This is a franchise that rented success for 6 consecutive years, at a level the NFL hadn't seen in a generation. Now they're renewing the lease, but the terms are different. The property is more expensive. Some of the old furniture is gone, and the landlord, in this case, the merciless equation of time and injury, has put in some new clauses that weren't there before. Mahomes' own comments in the immediate aftermath of that season were striking for what they revealed about his psychological state. He didn't deflect, he didn't manage expectations or spin the ending. When he came back from surgery and started talking to media in January, there was a directness to how he discussed the road ahead. He said he believed he'd be ready to start the season. He said rehab was going great. He said he was hitting all the checkpoints, but there was also a quiet steel in how he talked about it. Not the breezy confidence of someone who expects everything to go right, but the controlled focus of someone grinding through something hard and refusing to look too far ahead. "All I can do is be great today, and then continue to be great tomorrow," he said when asked about his future. That sentence could be about the injury. It could be about the season ahead. It could be about his entire career arc. It's the kind of answer that works on every level, which is why Mahomes chose it. He's good at those, but behind the discipline of the phrasing, the substance is real. He's operating on short-time horizons right now. Not because he's given up on the long view, but because the long view is built day by day, and the day in front of him is hard enough. The 2025 collapse also reshuffled how the rest of the AFC views Kansas City. For years, the question coming into every season was, who can stop the Chiefs? Now the question is, can the Chiefs get back to being the Chiefs? Buffalo has been waiting for exactly this window. The Bills knocked Kansas City out of the playoffs before. They swept them last season. And with Josh Allen locked in through a 6-year deal, they're not going anywhere. Cincinnati's Joe Burrow is healthy and hungry. Baltimore still has Lamar Jackson, who won another MVP. The AFC is stacked, and the Chiefs are no longer the automatic favorites in it. Early odds and MVP projections have Mahomes sitting 7th on the list of favorites for the 2026 season. 7th, behind 5 AFC quarterbacks and 1 NFC one. That is a number that would have been considered delusional 2 years ago, but it's where the market has him. Not because anyone has decided Mahomes is finished. Nobody rational believes that, but because the knee injury is real, the lost season is real, and the competition in that conference is as deep as it's been in a decade. Mahomes coming in at 7th isn't an insult. It's an honest accounting of where things stand. And that honesty, the same honesty that Mahomes brought to his own press conference, is the thread running through this whole story. The Chiefs can spin the narrative all they want. The contract is historic. The investment is real. The belief in Mahomes' ability to come back and do what he's always done, that belief is genuine. But numbers on a page don't play football. A contract doesn't fix a bad September if the knee isn't right. $500 million doesn't mean the dynasty is back. It means Kansas City is betting on the dynasty being back. That's a different thing entirely. The bet might be right. It probably is. But the fact that it's a bet, that there's genuine uncertainty wrapped around the most expensive quarterback deal in football history, is exactly the kind of thing Mahomes was acknowledging when he looked at a room full of reporters and said he couldn't predict the future. He wasn't being modest. He wasn't performing humility. He was being accurate. And in a world full of sports figures who perform certainty they don't feel, that's worth paying attention to. To really understand what's at stake here, you have to go back to the beginning, not just of Mahomes' career, but of the specific architecture that made this dynasty possible. Because the Chiefs didn't accidentally build a machine that produced 3 championships in 6 years. They did it through a combination of extraordinary quarterbacking, careful contract management, coaching stability, and crucially, a willingness to rethink the team around Mahomes every single offseason. The dynasty wasn't one thing. It was a constantly evolving project with one fixed point. Number 15. Mahomes' initial rookie contract in 2017 was a 4-year, $16.4 million deal. He played for $2 million in his first real starting season and proceeded to win the MVP award. The Chiefs knew immediately what they had. And Veach, who had been around the league long enough to know you don't let a generational quarterback walk, started working on locking him up before the market could complicate things. The 2020 10-year, $450 million contract wasn't just a payday. It was a declaration of intent. Kansas City wasn't going to do what Cleveland did with Baker Mayfield or what San Francisco eventually did with Jimmy Garoppolo. They were building a franchise and they were going to protect it. The 2020 deal also had a unique structure that separated it from every previous quarterback contract. The length, 10 years, was unprecedented for the position. Quarterbacks didn't sign decade-long deals. The thinking was always that the position was too physically demanding, too quickly devalued by age and injury, to commit to that far into the future. But Kansas City calculated differently. They looked at what Mahomes was and decided the rules that applied to other quarterbacks didn't apply to him. They decided to bet on him in full, not just for a window, for a career. Since that original deal, the Chiefs have made it a priority to ensure Mahomes is in Kansas City for the long haul, not with standard 4- or 5-year extensions, but with the full commitment of their franchise's financial future. Every restructure has maintained that commitment while giving the team the flexibility to keep winning. The framework they've used, converting base salary to signing bonus, spreading cap charges, adding void years, is textbook NFL contract management, but executed at a level of precision that other teams study like a case study. Veach has essentially been running a graduate seminar in team building for half a decade. The results have been staggering. 3 Super Bowl titles, 5 appearances, 6 Pro Bowl selections for Mahomes, 2 MVP awards, 3 Super Bowl MVP awards, a dynasty-level run that established Kansas City, a mid-sized Midwestern market that never historically competed for national football attention, as one of the most recognized brands in the sport. The Chiefs sell out every game, their appointment TV nationally. They've become the kind of franchise that people who don't care about football know by name, partly because of Mahomes and partly because of the culture that's been built around him. Mahomes has also extended his presence in Kansas City beyond the field, co-owning the KC Current NWSL team and holding a minority stake in the Royals. That kind of community embedding doesn't happen by accident. It's a deliberate choice by a man who has decided that Kansas City isn't just where he plays. It's where he lives, where he's invested, where his family is rooted. Brittany Mahomes' Instagram post after the signing, "Red is our color and Kansas City is our home," reflects a domestic reality as much as a professional one. The Mahomes family is Kansas City in a way that very few athlete-franchise relationships ever become. But dynasties are organic, living things. They grow and they age and they shift their shapes. The Chiefs dynasty was built around a core that's now entering its late stages. Travis Kelce, arguably the greatest tight end in NFL history, is still playing, but at an age where the end of his career is a topic of genuine conversation, not distant speculation. He and Mahomes have one of the most productive quarterback-to-tight end connections the game has ever seen. How many more years that lasts is an open question. Chris Jones, who signed multiple extensions to stay in Kansas City and who anchors the defense, is also aging into the back half of his prime. The building blocks of the dynasty aren't going away tomorrow, but they're not getting younger. The coaching staff is another variable. Andy Reid is a Hall of Fame certainty, one of the great offensive minds in the sport's history and the architect of the scheme that has made Mahomes so unstoppable. Reid and Mahomes are both future Hall of Famers, and they've achieved remarkable success since Mahomes took the starting job in 2018. But Reid isn't getting younger either, and at some point, not today, not necessarily soon, but eventually, that partnership will have to change. And when it does, the offense Mahomes runs will look different. Not necessarily worse, but different. That's a risk that no contract can fully price in. The offensive coordinator situation reflects some of that uncertainty. Eric Bieniemy is back in Kansas City for 2026 after spending time away from the staff. His return brings familiarity and a track record of success within this specific system. But the fact that the Chiefs needed to bring back a coordinator from outside the building to stabilize the offense tells you something about the transition period they're navigating. The offensive identity that made them unstoppable in 2019, 2020, and beyond didn't just maintain itself automatically. It required constant cultivation. And in a year where the head coach's right-hand quarterback was on a training table, some of that cultivation slipped. The receiver room is probably the most glaring question mark. Rashee Rice missed significant time with injury issues last year. Xavier Worthy has upside but is still developing. Tyquan Thornton adds a speed dimension. That's a group with potential, but it's not the kind of established deep weapons core that a championship-caliber offense typically operates from. Mahomes has always made his receivers better. His placements, his improvisation, his ability to extend plays on broken downs elevates everyone around him. But there's a threshold of talent below which even Mahomes can't fully compensate. The Chiefs need at least one of those receivers to take a significant leap forward. Kenneth Walker III's arrival is the most exciting addition to the 2026 roster on paper. A Super Bowl MVP running back, brought in specifically to rebuild the ground game and take some pressure off a recovering quarterback. If Walker hits the ground running, and the talent and track record suggest he will, it could fundamentally change how opposing defenses approach the Chiefs. When Kansas City had a dominant backfield, it opened the play-action game for Mahomes in ways that were nearly impossible to defend. A healthy, dynamic run game in 2026 could be the missing piece that makes everything else click back into place. The defense, meanwhile, was overhauled substantially in the offseason. The Chiefs brought back Elgerius Sneed, a player they'd let go previously, and reinforced multiple areas. Chris Jones remains the centerpiece, still capable of being one of the most disruptive interior linemen in the game. If the defense can be what it was during the championship runs, physical, aggressive, capable of winning low-scoring games when the offense isn't clicking, then Kansas City has a real shot at relevance in 2026, regardless of how smoothly Mahomes comes out of recovery. But all of this, the roster moves, the scheme changes, the returning coordinator, the new running back, all of it is built on the assumption of a healthy Mahomes, not just starting week 1 healthy. Playing like himself healthy, the kind of healthy that means he can roll out of the pocket at full speed, take hits on scrambles, make the improvised escapes that have defined his game for 8 years. Nobody knows how his knee will respond the first time he takes a live hit. Not the doctors, not the coaches, not Mahomes himself. You can hit every checkpoint in rehab and still have a different body than you did before the injury. The knee doesn't forget. This is the brutal reality beneath all the celebration. $500 million and a room full of reporters asking about legacy and greatness and dynasty. And at the center of all of it is one biological question that money can't answer. Can Patrick Mahomes play at the level he played at before? Not a version of him. Him, the no-look guy, the fourth quarter guy, the guy who made 6 trips to the Super Bowl feel almost routine. That guy, if that guy is back, the Chiefs are fine, better than fine. If that guy has been replaced by something slightly, almost imperceptibly different, if the athleticism is a step slower, if the escape velocity is down, if the scrambles take a half second more, the gap between Kansas City's ceiling and the rest of the conference tightens in ways that matter enormously. Mahomes characteristically isn't dwelling on any of this publicly. He said all the right things about his recovery. He's shown up to OTAs. He's worked with the receivers, maintained his timing, worn the brace without complaint, and insisted it's not an issue. Andy Reid has backed him up completely. He's working hard, Reid said. He's busting his tail. Those aren't the words of a coaching staff managing expectations. Those are the words of a man who sees what he expects to see in practice every day, and genuinely believes his quarterback is going to be himself by September. And maybe Reid is right. He's been right about Mahomes more times than he's been wrong. But the dynasty machine that the Chiefs have been running requires all of its components to be functioning at close to their peak. The engine is Mahomes, the chassis is the contract and the cap structure. The drivetrain is the coaching staff, and scheme, the fuel, is the roster. Right now, the engine is in the process of being rebuilt after a significant breakdown. Everything else can be tuned and optimized, but the engine has to hold. And whether it does, whether it holds for another year, another 5 years, another full 8 years through 2033, is the question that sits under every headline, every contract detail, every press conference answer, and every single thing Mahomes says from here until he plays a regular season snap again. So here's where everything lands. You have the biggest contract in the history of the sport, a quarterback who is both the best at his position and the most publicly vulnerable he's ever been, a franchise that has tasted the highest heights and the lowest recent valley inside the same 12-month window, a division that has gotten harder, a conference that has gotten harder, a roster that is built around one player's health in a way that makes every variable dependent on every other variable, and a statement from the man at the center of it all. I want to be here, but I can't promise you forever. What does that mean going forward? Not just for the 2026 season, but for the entire arc that this contract is supposed to cover. Because a deal that runs through 2033 is a story that's going to be told in chapters, and the first chapter starts in September against the Denver Broncos on Monday Night Football. That's the Chiefs' season opener. Mahomes' first real test, live bullets, a full stadium, a division rival with something to prove, and a coach in Sean Payton, who just committed his own future to the organization. If Mahomes comes out of that game looking like himself, moving freely, throwing with authority, converting on the scrambles, the conversation changes overnight. The speed of narrative shift in the NFL is remarkable. 1 week after the $504 million extension dropped, people were already framing Mahomes as an underdog. 7th on MVP boards. Under the microscope, a comeback story in progress. That framing isn't entirely wrong, but it also undersells what this man is capable of. When the lights are on and the competition is real, Mahomes' career is full of moments where external doubt became internal fuel. The 2019 season when the defense was a mess, and people questioned whether the offense alone could carry them. Super Bowl LV when the offensive line completely fell apart and they got obliterated. He came back from that. Every time, he came back. The instinct to bet against Mahomes is one that has been punished repeatedly over the last 8 years. The people who wrote the Chiefs off after the blowout loss to the Buccaneers in Tampa, they watched him win 2 more championships after that. The people who said the dynasty was aging out after the Bills swept them, they're watching him sign $500 million. The pattern is consistent enough that skepticism requires a genuine reason, and the knee injury is the first genuine reason anyone has had to pause. Not to walk away from Mahomes, but to genuinely ask, what does this look like on the other side? The answer, based on everything we know about the man and the organization, is probably different in some ways, still elite in the ways that count. The physical Mahomes, the one who outruns defensive ends and converts third and long scrambles, may look different after this injury than he did before it. Bodies adapt after ACL tears. Some players come back with an adjusted game, less willing to take the hits that used to be routine. Some come back finding new ways to win without the same athleticism. Tom Brady, for reference, became an entirely different quarterback after his athleticism faded. He won 3 more Super Bowls. Mahomes will evolve the same way, if he has to. The intelligence and the decision-making and the pocket sense that made him elite from day one, those don't live in the knee. They live in the film study, the preparation, the ability to see a defense and manipulate it in real time. He's thrown for nearly 36-0 yards and led this franchise to 5 Super Bowl trips. Through a combination of physical gifts and mental processing that very few quarterbacks have ever matched. If the physical gifts take a slight step back, the mental processing is still there. The Chiefs and Mahomes himself are betting that's enough. The family element of this story carries more weight than it usually gets in football conversations. When Brittany Mahomes posted that family photo from the contract signing, 4 kids in Chiefs red, everyone smiling, and wrote, "Red is our color, and Kansas City is our home." She was speaking for an entire family unit that has built its life in that city. The kids go to school there. The businesses are there. The friendships, the community ties, the identity, all of it is rooted in Kansas City in a way that's been decades in the making. Patrick and Brittany aren't going anywhere easily. The logistics of what leaving would even mean at this point in their lives is almost abstract, which makes his "can't predict the future" comment even more interesting, because he's not talking about wanting to leave. He's not signaling unhappiness or discontent. He's talking about the fundamental uncertainty of a 30-year-old athlete who just tore 2 ligaments and is trying to be honest with himself and with the world about what the next decade actually holds. "I can't predict the future" isn't a threat, it's a confession. It's the sound of a competitor who has controlled so much for so long, finally being honest about the one thing he can't control, time and what it does to a body. What the Chiefs organization is banking on, what every decision they've made in the last 6 months has been built toward, is Mahomes showing up in September and making all of this conversation feel like dramatic overreaction. And that's not a bad bet. When the ball snaps and the coverage rolls and the pocket starts to collapse, Mahomes' brain does something the rest of the league can't replicate. The improvisation, the extension of plays, the ability to see 3 steps ahead while moving at full speed. That's not purely physical, it's architectural. It's built into how he processes the game, and you don't lose that from a knee surgery. The offensive coordinator coming back, the new running back creating balance, the defense being reinforced, all of it is designed to give Mahomes the environment to be himself again. The Chiefs clearly have full confidence in him to lead the franchise for years to come. That confidence isn't blind. Veach and Reed have seen enough football to know the difference between a player who is genuinely going to come back and one who says the right things in June and then falls short in September. The contract, the commitment, the public messaging, none of it would exist if there was serious internal doubt about Mahomes' recovery. The organization believes he's coming back, They're putting the biggest financial commitment in the sport's history on that belief. And the rest of the AFC, they're watching very carefully. Buffalo's Josh Allen, who has emerged as the most complete rival Mahomes has faced since his ascent, has been the AFC's best quarterback over the last few years when measured across a full body of work. He knows this is his window. The Bills know this is their window. If Mahomes comes back at 90% instead of 100%, if the knee robs him of even a few degrees of explosiveness, Allen can take advantage of that in a way that previous rivals couldn't. The AFC Championship isn't handed to anyone this year. Every team that faces Kansas City will be probing for exactly those limitations. The Ravens, the Bengals, the Chargers, they've all updated their rosters, advanced their schemes, and prepared for the possibility that the Chiefs are vulnerable in ways they haven't been before. That's the competitive landscape Mahomes is walking back into, on one recovered knee and the weight of the most expensive contract in football history. No shortcuts, no grace period, no sympathy from the schedule or the standings. From the first snap of the season, everyone will be watching to see which version of Mahomes shows up, the one who bends games to his will, or a slightly revised edition. Back to the comment itself, I can't predict the future. 4 words that carry the whole weight of this story. In those 4 words, Mahomes told you more than everything his agency said in its celebratory tweet, more than what Clark Hunt said in his statement, more than what Andy Reid said about busting his tail in practice. Because all of those statements are performing certainty. Mahomes' statement was performing honesty. And there's a reason that honesty landed so differently in a room full of people expecting nothing but champagne talk. He's 30 years old. He's recovering from a torn ACL. He just signed himself to a building for the next 8 years, through a deal that gives him financial security that transcends football entirely. He doesn't need to take cheap hits in December to protect a stat line. He doesn't need to play hurt to prove himself. He doesn't need to be the same person at 38 that he was at 26. What he needs to do, what the $504 million actually buys the Chiefs, is the best version of Patrick Mahomes that exists between now and 2033. And the best version of Patrick Mahomes that exists for the next 8 years may look different from the best version that existed for the last 8. That's not a failure. That's what 8 years looks like. Brady understood it. Manning understood it. Now Mahomes is standing at the doorway of that same understanding, holding a contract that demands the next chapter be written. The chapter that starts in September will tell us an enormous amount. Not everything. One game, one season, 1 year can't resolve the full shape of a career. But it'll tell us whether the machine is back online, whether the knee held, whether the adjustment period was weeks or months, whether the supporting cast is good enough to supplement a quarterback who might need supplementing more than he ever has before, whether Kansas City can win a division where they're no longer the assumed favorite. All of those answers are coming. None of them are known yet. And Patrick Mahomes, who knows that better than anyone, told you so himself. The contract is signed. The money is committed. The dynasty machine is being rebuilt around the same engine it's always run on. Number 15. Number 1, the quarterback from Texas Tech who showed up in 2018 and rearranged the entire landscape of the sport. But the dynasty machine has also been through something now that it hadn't been through before. A real fall, a real injury, a real season of humiliation and loss. And the player at the center of it, the one who signed the paper, posed for the photo, posted the social media celebration, and then looked at a reporter and said, "I can't predict the future," is the only one in the room being honest about what that means. What it means is this: the next era of Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs begins now, and it begins with something the last era never had. Genuine stakes. Genuine uncertainty. A real question that doesn't have a predetermined answer. For the first time in a long time, nobody knows how this turns out. And Mahomes, to his enormous credit, has enough integrity to stand in the middle of the biggest celebration of his professional life and tell you that he doesn't know either. That's not weakness. That's the most honest thing an athlete in his position can say. And it's the reason this story, $500 million, a knee brace, and 4 quiet words is one of the most compelling things in football right now. We ain't done yet though. That's what he wrote in the Instagram caption. And whatever comes next, whatever 2026 brings, whatever the knee looks like in October, whatever the conference looks like come January. That line is the truest thing he said all week, because Patrick Mahomes being done is not a story anyone is prepared to tell. Not him. Not Kansas City. Not the NFL. The machine isn't broken. It's under construction. And when it's done, it's going to want to win something. Whether that happens exactly the way the contract imagines it, on exactly the timeline the numbers suggest, with exactly the same quarterback, in exactly the same city until 2033. That part, the man himself told you, he can't predict. Neither can